I was 25 when I was diagnosed. I was actually at home with a friend working out, and we were at the end stretching, and I felt this lump that was just itching and just kind of put it off at first. I always had fibrocystic breast, and after a few days of it itching, they'd never itched before, so I decided it was time to go and get it checked out. When I went in for the ultrasound, they weren't even going to biopsy it at first. They thought it was just a fibroadenoma. And I actually worked in the radiology department where I went in, and they're like, well, let's just go ahead and biopsy it to have it on file. And I didn't think much of it. And so I went and picked up a friend of mine to go back with me, thinking it was going to be nothing, and they were just going to educate me on, you know, my follow-ups. And then when they told me, just shock. I didn't really know what to say. I just didn't really feel anything. I was just like, okay, what's next? I knew what was next. I was like, let's go back to the hospital and do my MRI now. And I'll figure out who I need to go see now. I didn't really process much of it, to be honest with you, for a while. I just kind of stayed in kind of fight or flight mode with the whole thing. You know, I probably still am in that work in progress of, you know, processing it. But, you know, I just went to work every day, went and saw my doctors, and kind of acted like it wasn't going on.
I basically knew my daughter, Sherling, who I called a little bit, that she had breast cancer before she even called me. When she wouldn't return my phone calls, I knew she went in to get her biopsy result, and she wouldn't return the phone calls. That they had told me she had breast cancer. And I held it together until she got there. And then I just ran in the room and cried before she even told me. As a mother, you don't want your children to go through that. I literally begged God to let it be me, not her. Gotta watch what you ask for sometimes. I happened to recline in my recliner, and I remember reaching up and scratching myself in that reclined position, and something just didn't feel right. And I went into my doctor and told her that she wasn't going to find it touching it unless I was in a certain position. And I was watching the ultrasound screen. We did it in her office, and we all knew. When we looked at the screen, we knew it was cancer, but we just couldn't say it. And my son came home from work for lunch on January 3rd when I got my phone call. But I wasn't shocked. None of us was shocked. And my son immediately called his boss and said, I can't come in, I gotta stay here with my mama. I was more panicky trying to figure out how I was gonna tell a little bit. I was diagnosed 3 months after Sherling. And it was like, how was I gonna take care of my baby? This wasn't fair. I was numbed. I was scared to tell her. And when I told her, she actually took me by my hands. She said, Mom, it's gonna be okay. We're gonna get through this together.
It just kind of made sense to me with everything at that point. I had never really wondered, you know, like, why things had happened. But, you know, I always kind of told myself, you know, everything happens for a reason. God kind of chooses things for people to go through for other people to see. And, you know, in the profession I have, I see a lot of women every day that are newly diagnosed, and I just figured, you know, they need to see somebody going through it when they're finding out and they're scared, and see that I'm gonna be okay. And then my mom was diagnosed, and I'm like, yeah, she needed to see somebody that it was gonna be okay ahead of time, so she knew what to expect, you know?
We have such a strong family history of breast and ovarian cancer that we were able to show not just our family, but other families that going through this together, you come out stronger, and not to look at it as a life sentence, but you learn to dig deep down inside of you and see who you really are. My family history, as far as breast cancer, goes back to my grandmother's sisters. Her oldest sister was diagnosed with breast cancer in her probably around 30. And then her baby sister was also diagnosed with breast cancer in her 30s. And from that moment on, it seems like it's been every generation since then. Little bit is now the 5th generation on my mother's side to be diagnosed with breast cancer, and the 3rd generation on my father's side. As far as the genetic testing for breast cancer, I was starting to learn about it probably a year or 2 before we were diagnosed that we had breast cancer. And I was throwing it up in the air, rather to be tested or not. And then when Lil Bit was diagnosed, that I started thinking more about it. And then when I became diagnosed with breast cancer, there was no question about it. So they tested me first, and we were not shocked that I carried the gene. And from there, a little bit was tested. And once again, we wasn't shocked. And my oldest daughter got tested, and she also carries the gene. We chose to be tested because we feel having the knowledge of knowing if we carry the gene or not helps us to make a wiser decision of what we want to do from that moment on. You know, Lil Bit and I, because we had breast cancer, we chose to have a bilateral mastectomy. But when my oldest daughter was tested positive, she said, "Mom, I don't want to play around with this." And she took it upon herself to become what we call a pre-fiver, and she had the bilateral mastectomy to fight her chances of not getting breast cancer and having to go through the treatments that she watched her sister and I go through.
I really hope anybody watching any of these videos just realizes that they're not alone, that as much as you think that other people don't understand, they don't fully understand because they're not you, but they understand a little.
And I have to agree with a little bit. You're gonna have your ups and downs, but don't ever, ever give up. Everybody's unique. Their circumstances is unique, but you can do it, you can survive. And everything you have to go through to survive, it's worth it. It's worth it. No matter what age you are, it's worth it.